Okay, so we're going to get started. Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Bagdes-Canning. I'm the candidate for PA representative in District 64. Welcome to tonight's conversation. There's a better way, rethinking healthcare in the pandemic. We're going to host a number of these things in the coming weeks, so keep looking out for them. On September 23rd, we're going to have a conversation with Frank Kirkwood. He's from the Western Pennsylvania chapter of March on Harrisburg. He'll be sitting in with J. Ting Walker. He's a candidate for District 23 in Pittsburgh. We're going to be talking about how 21st century corruption works. And on September 25th, I'll be sitting down with Dr. Patricia DeMarco, and the topic will be green jobs. So I hope you'll check that out. I also urge you to check out our webpage, Mike4PA64.com. That's Mike, FORPA64.com. And then if you're there, check out our Twitter feed and our Instagram feed. I'm pretty excited about both. I'm new to Instagram and I'm getting the hang of it. We're putting some videos on there. I'm excited about that. I'm not Tony Booba, the Bart from Braddock, but I am having fun. Before we begin this, I'd like to acknowledge that some of us said goodbye to Kevin Zeese today. Kevin was one of those people that exemplifies something Wendell Berry said. It's not from ourselves that we learn to be better than we are. Kevin was a friend and a mentor, so rest in power, Kevin, I mean. Tonight, we're going to be talking about healthcare. Our guest is Ed Grystar. But before we get to Ed, I want this to be a conversation. Ed and I are going to talk, but I'd like to invite everyone tuning in to ask questions. You can do that by posting in the comments section below the live feed. And I'll be monitoring that as we go along. Ed has over 40 years of experience in labor, healthcare, peace and environmental justice issues and movements. He's been involved with a number of unions. He's been an organizer and negotiator. He served as the president of the Butler County United Labor Council for 15 years. His most recent work there was with the Pennsylvania Association of Staff Nurses and Allied Professionals, where he helped organize employees and negotiate contracts. In 2006, he helped organize the Western Pennsylvania Coalition for Single-Payer Healthcare, a grassroots citizen organization that educates and advocates for nonprofit single-payer healthcare, and he currently serves as the chairperson. Ed resides in Oakmont and was involved in organizing citizen pressure in the borough to help pass a stronger oil and gas zoning ordinance to protect the health and safety of borough residents. On a personal note, Ed has served as a mentor and is currently an advisor to this campaign. Hi, Ed. How you doing?
Good. Thanks, Mike.
So healthcare is an issue that touches most of us. The issue became very real for me when my sister and her family had a child with serious medical issues. Even though they were both professionals and they made very good money, they ended up having to declare bankruptcy. That just seems wrong. What do you think, Ed?
Well, unfortunately, a medical bankruptcy is the highest cause of bankruptcies, or if not the highest, it's one of the highest cause near with student debt. And it's exemplified, or it's a symptom of the sick healthcare system that's run essentially for insurance companies. And until we start understanding why the profits of the insurance companies and the healthcare giants, the hospitals, the pharma, are the causes of this, people will continue to suffer and having bankruptcy. For instance, nobody in Canada has ever gone bankrupt because of medical expenses, or almost in any developed country in the Western world. But in the US, as you can see, it's a problem. And even though we've allegedly had the fix, quote unquote, the fix of Obamacare, it really hasn't done much to change the fundamental characteristics of the delivery system, which is run for profit. And we can get into the details of that and why that can't be a solution.
Why don't we talk about that then? Yeah, what exactly are you proposing?
Well, what we have right now, and people, it's very important that people understand what the current system embodies now. And what we have right now is a delivery system. When I say delivery system, I mean the hospitals, the providers, the networks, everywhere where you go, and the payment system is pretty much based on insurance. And so the purpose of the payment for your services that you, let's say you get in a hospital, is based upon, first of all, whether you have insurance. And the insurance company's main goal is not to provide health care, but it's literally the fiduciary responsibility of insurance company is to its shareholders. So their goal is to minimize payments. So what we have today is you have 50, 60, 70, 80, it probably in the hundreds of different insurance companies. And each one of those insurance companies has its own set of rules, its own set of procedures. It has its own network of people. And that administrative expense amounts to like hundreds of billions of dollars a year. The Physicians for National Health Plan has already done research on this, and their estimate is it's approximately $600 billion a year is wasted by the insurance companies on profits, excessive salaries, and administrative waste. So when you go and process a bill, essentially you're filing a claim to get a service that you think you deserve. The insurance company has a network of people that look at your claim and they decide whether it's valid or not. All this is extra money. If you had a single payer, the difference is if you had a single payer system, essentially what you would do is you would not pay insurance premiums, because insurance companies, our argument is, and it's true, insurance companies don't provide health care. They don't care for the sick. They don't take care of the needy. They don't do anything except collect your money. So when we say single payer, all we're saying is that hospitals need to be reimbursed, doctors need to be reimbursed, healthcare providers need to be reimbursed for their legitimate expenses, and it's an important function in any civilized society. The question then becomes, why would we need insurance companies to make all of this extra profit, this extra waste, when we could just have a single payer? So you would exchange all of your premiums that you now pay, all of your copays, all of your deductibles, all of this unnecessary roadblocks to get care. And people would, yes, they would pay a tax, but the tax under the system that we figured out is substantially less than all of your payments that you make now.
Why is that, Ed? Why is that? Yeah.
Well, because again, if you take the $600 billion of just administrative waste, and when we say administrative waste, I guess, we're talking here to people in Western Pennsylvania. Why would you need an advertisement at the Heinz Field or PNC Park that says Allegheny Health Network sponsors this pitch? Or why do we need anything? That is just wasted money that is inherent in the system. And so until you eliminate that system, until you eliminate all of the work that is done to eliminate your care through administrative expenses, processing bills and things like that. I guess the best example would be about 15 years ago, there was someone from Canada, and we had a rally in Beaver County. And in that rally in Beaver County for single payer, he said he had two big boxes. He came to the meeting, and he had, there's this box here, and it was filled with like hundreds and hundreds of envelopes and papers and whatever. And he picked up the box and he threw it down, and he said, "This is what I get for having health care in the United States. Every day I get a new mailing from UPMC or Highmark, join this insurance company. This one isn't any good, this and this and that." And he said, if I was in Canada, what I have is, he pulled out of his pocket, he had one card. And he said, that's the difference. You're paying all this wasted money that could be going to healthcare. And that's really what essentially a single payer really means. It doesn't change the delivery. The hospitals will still be there. They will still be private nonprofit hospitals that you could choose any doctor you would want to go to. And the payment, it's a payment mechanism. So you would have one payment, single payer, and it just streamlines everything. And it obviously makes the most sense. Why does it make the most sense? Because almost every other industrialized country in the world now has it.
Yeah. So one of the questions that we got in Facebook is, what's the difference between Medicare, improve and expanded Medicare for all, and something that's called universal health care? Is there a difference?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Because universal health care is just a gibberish term that's used by every politician and grifter going that talks about providing health care for people. And the essence of it is that under the insurance system, none of them have been able to provide universal health care. And the best example is that, as we said, 2009, we had Obamacare. It was supposed to be affordable health care. And now the prices have gone up and up and up. There's less and less people with coverage. So it did do a couple of minor tweaks, but it can't solve the system, can't solve the problem, because it's based on profits first. Now, what is Medicare? Currently, our Medicare system, before it now is slowly being privatized, Medicare is literally a single payer system, meaning that if you have Medicare right now, the coverages that Medicare pays for, which is only about 80% of the services, which is a weakness of Medicare. So when we say Medicare for all, what we really mean is expanded and improved Medicare for all, which is what the question wants to know. And so what we're talking about here is making Medicare cover all available and necessary healthcare expenditures, including dental, vision, long-term care, hearing aids. All the things that aren't covered now would be covered under a single payer Medicare for all system and literally cost the people less money. Who would not benefit from this? The insurance companies. The big pharma would not benefit from this. So that's where the opposition comes from. And I guess it is kind of sometimes confusing when we talk about Medicare for all, because, as I started out, only about 75 or 80% of medical bills are covered by Medicare. So many people, including like myself, you have to get an extra coverage, a Medigap plan, or you enroll in an HMO, a privatized HMO, and those cost money. So people have to understand, if you go to an expanded and improved Medicare system, the coverages will be much greater than you currently have now. And the last thing I did before I retired was, I never forget it, is I was in the union convention with the nurses, and people said, well, what is it that we should be preparing for healthcare? And I said, well, how many of you have about $250,000 saved up? And this was a convention of nurses. And of course, they looked at me astounded, and they said, well, you know, maybe I have some money saved up, but that's about all I have. And they said, well, why do you say that? Because the financial system, Wall Street, the capitalists say a couple needs to have around $250,000 saved just to pay the expenses that the current Medicare system doesn't cover. This is not a system benefiting people. It's benefiting the rich, it's benefiting the insurance companies, and they're making, in the middle of this pandemic, they're making tens of millions of dollars more in profit because people are scared to go to the hospital. They're scared to use their coverage. It's just a failure. It's an absolute failure. And we can talk about, where we go from here, but I think you have to understand the intricacies, which a lot of people, they get lost in the weeds. You got to know the essence of how it works so you could understand it and realize that it can't work. It simply can't work.
Yeah, that was one of the things. I mean, I'm on Medicare now, so that was a thing that I just was not prepared for. I guess when I retired, I figured, Medicare was going to be I was going to get taken care of for everything, but that's not how it works. I mean, there's some things that aren't covered, like dental and vision. And you mentioned also long-term care. I'd like to talk about that later. But
prescription drugs, for instance, you have to buy a separate prescription plan, and those are all set up to make money first. And I think that's what sometimes people don't want to come to grips with, the fact that the system is set up not to provide care. It's literally set up to make money for the providers. And unless you have a kind of like Pollyannish view of things, you'll get real confused. So if you go from the idea that why don't we have dental care, and why don't we have long-term care? That's the other thing. Long-term care is now all people have to almost go bankrupt to get nursing home care. My family is in the same situation now, where we're literally having to sell the home of my mom to pay for her care. And it's like she lived all of her life, but now in order to have long-term care, well, what kind of society is that? If people want to live like that, most people are going to be paupers. They're in the future is not bright. Today's Wall Street Journal talked about the 401k. Now, keep in mind, the Wall Street Journal was cheerleading for 401ks 25, 35 years ago. And when I negotiated a couple of my last contracts, they said, hey, Ed, the pension system this is the new thing. 401ks, this is the new wave. That you don't need a pension anymore. Well, literally, they actually said the median savings of an American today for retirement is $8,000. Think about that. Just think that through.
Especially in light of what you said about 250,000. Yeah.
So it's like, well, what is the future? And I think that's why your candidacy and raising of these issues and encouraging people to start taking the blinders off their eyes, because unless they do that, the future will not be bright, and it's already pretty clearly. Whether it's student debt, it's medical debt, it's criminal. And how are we going to raise your children and live if you're in debt to everybody?
Absolutely. I mean, and that's something that scares the heck out of me all the time with like my family. There's folks that don't have insurance, but then also we have folks that are not ready to retire, even though they're of age. So we just had a question about, and I know you started to answer it, but I'm not sure you got into the details. But improved and expanded Medicare for all, that includes dental and vision.
Yes, dental, vision, long-term care, hearing aids, chiropractic care. The way it's defined is what's medically necessary. And you can go, remember the boogeyman that before, in fact, the ridiculous thing is the boogeyman before was 20 years ago was, well, this is socialism. You're going to lose your doctor. Somehow or other, the Russians are going to control the doctor that you go to. But the reality is it's turned on its head. Everybody knows that you're restricted by your insurance company.
Absolutely. I mean, just a personal story here. I had to have a hip replacement, and I looked and researched who the doctors were that were like exemplary, and I found one in Pittsburgh that was. I thought, hey, this is great, and I called his office, and he said, well, he didn't, but his folks said, hey, no, we don't accept Highmark. I was on Highmark at that point. Mm-hmm. And they said, you can go to Allegheny General, but there was nobody there that I was really feeling confident about. So I said, no, is there anybody else? And again, no. And finally they said, well, you can always go to Cleveland. and I found a doctor there. So I ended up having to go to Cleveland to get my hip rather than going because my insurance company wouldn't pay for the.
Right.
That's crazy.
That's the nature of the beast. And again, using this whole red baiting, ridiculous thing that everything is socialism. In fact, if some people, I listen to Trump a couple of days ago on TV when he was being interviewed by George Stephanopoulos, and Stephanopoulos never challenged him, but he must have said it 10 times that if you want Medicare for all, that's socialism. You'll lose your doctor, you'll lose your plan. It's almost the absurd. It's like it's totally off base. It's like insane. But that's the kind of information or misinformation that's put out to the public, and we have to challenge it. And like our group, Western Pennsylvania, we've been around for around 15 years. And we have to say that there's been like a qualitative increase in the perception or the interest in Medicare for all, whereas before our goal was just educating people and talking to them and trying to develop a critical mass. But today, the support is widespread. And thanks to literally Bernie Sanders made it, and I think that made it more so. But he just built on the foundations that we actually did 15, 20 years ago by exposing the insurance companies and their nefarious, means. And today, again, there's a political disconnect. And this is one of the reasons we're on talking about it, is that how could it be that 75 or 80% of Democrats and a smaller percentage of Republicans and independents, all told, there's a
majority though, right?
A majority of people want Medicare for all, yet none of the mainstream politicians are supporting it. And in fact, the only presidential candidate that supported Medicare for all, the Democrats went to throw him off the ballot, Holly Hawkins. So you have to ask people and say, well, what kind of a democracy and what kind of a system are we living in where a majority of people need health care and desperately need it in the middle of a pandemic, yet we have a flippant attitude among our political candidates and parties that somehow or other we're just happy with the current system. So I think, people have to start drawing their own conclusions and kind of waking up to the reality that it isn't going to change. That if it isn't going to change now, what makes you think that it's somehow going to be a magical bulb that's going to go off on November the 3rd or whatever? It isn't. So that's why we're here today, that our problems are deep rooted. They're systemic. The systemic roots of healthcare problems is in the for-profit system. The US pays the most for prescription drugs. Why is it that every other country in the world pays about half of what we pay? Because our politicians are bought off. They don't listen to you. And all we can do is say that. And we argue, the other argument that for the public is that, well, why is it that there's no interviews and no questions and no stories in the local papers or on TVs or radio media with people? If you have 75% of the people that want Medicare for all, you would think that they'd be wanting to say, hey, well, what is it that's driving this? And let's talk to the people, but they white us out or they black us out. They refuse to cover us. And if they do cover us, they have to have 10 people who oppose us every time we get one story in the paper. Yeah. So we're never interviewed. And that's a conscious, systemic root. This isn't like some mistake, or this is a lie of omission. It's part of the system. And,
exactly. And we have the same thing in the environmental movement. I mean, every time you bring something up, then they have to get somebody from the other side, or actually multiple somebody from the other side to drown out your message. We had a couple comments. One of them was along the lines of, we lost, I guess 1 million people lost were not insured last year that were insured the year before. And then also a lot of people lost their insurance during the pandemic. How would Medicare for all affect that?
Well,
let me piggyback on a little bit on that too, because the other thing is that a lot of people are stuck in jobs they absolutely hate.
Right.
But they're afraid to leave because if they do, they'll lose their good medical coverage. So talk about that.
Well, the idea that if people are tied to their jobs, or excuse me, tied their insurance, their health care is tied to their employer is just another anomaly that it makes no sense. It's only basically in a country like the United States and that gives more control to the employer over the employee. And so if you had Medicare for all, expanded and improved Medicare for all, a single payer system, people would be able to go from job to job wherever they wanted to go without a worry about losing their health care. That's a huge positive step forward. And again, in today's world, the pandemic, millions of people are losing their coverage, or they have lost it, and more will lose it every day. If you had Medicare for all, like Germany, France, or all these other countries that have it, people, if they lost their jobs, they would not lose their health care. They would still have health care, which is crucial. You know, like our whole system today with the pandemic has shown the deficiencies of this employer-based system. Yet, because none of our politicians, you know, none of the Democrats or Republicans who's running for Congress, none of them are really for Medicare for all. They're defending the current system as if it's somehow God sent, that it dropped from the sky. It was imposed on people. And so you have to answer yourselves those questions and say, well, how could we do this better? How would it be better? Sick days. People don't have sick days. People don't have leave. We're losing, and while all this is going on, the wealth of the richest people have been increasing. You know, the stocks of the healthcare insurance companies are going up. They're skyrocketing. Most of the research done for the pharma is done by public research. And then they're able to take it and monopolize it for a profit. So if you kind of like that system, then you should be cheering, wave the flag, and everything is fine. But if you think that this is wrong, and most people, like the latest poll said 30-some% of the people are worried about their jobs, are worried about healthcare. Well, what are the presidential candidates talking about? None of them have any issues because they don't have any solutions. There is no solution under the private insurance system.
Hey, so the other thing I was going to piggyback on the pandemic is that we found that during this pandemic so far that it disproportionately affected poor people. And why would that be?
Well, I think that, again, most of the poor people and blacks, I think the latest thing we saw was that people of color, whether it's black or brown, are over 30% of the people that are hospitalized for COVID. And one of the reasons is because they already have a lack of access to good health care. And they're in jobs that are low paid. They're not in jobs that they can stay at home and work remotely. And those issues are never dealt with. Like OSHA. OSHA has had thousands of complaints, but the issues no OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health. So all of the things that working people have to deal with, whether it's working in close proximity, working in low wage jobs, they don't have child care, they have no sick days, they have a lack of health care to begin with. So all of those things are exacerbated by this pandemic. And if you had Medicare for all, it wouldn't be the end all of solution, but it's a fundamental step to justice. Without Medicare for all, for instance, like before we talked about this, there's a movie called Power to Heal. And most people don't even know the role that Medicare played in the civil rights movement in 1965 when you got Medicare passed. Most of the people don't even know that the hospitals in the South wouldn't accept black people. They literally had separate wards if they even had any ward. And Medicare literally forced the integration of the hospitals in the United States, which gave health care to people. And if we had Medicare for all today, expanded Medicare, we would do roughly the same thing, expand that coverage to the people who now don't have it, which are tens of millions of people, and most of the other people who have junk insurance, which again, if you read the paper, the GAO came out with a report that said that many of these insurance companies, people who say, "Oh well, hey, I saw that insurance company on TV, and they were really cool. They had a nice commercial. They're selling junk insurance." Now, what does that mean? That means insurance that doesn't really give you any benefit. You have to go through 100 loopholes. It confuses people. That's, again, junk insurance, lack of care. Those are all endemic to this system. And everything that we need to do, we need to confront that and change that. And until people are willing to do that in an organized way and elect people like you and others who will fight for that, we're going to get the short end.
That's definitely something that we're fighting for, and I want to get back to that later. But there was a comment in the comment section. It said, talking about being older and lack of care. It said, I'd just rather walk into the woods and die rather than bankrupt my family for elder care in a nursing home.
Well, I think that's a sad sign. That's why you see today in this society, there's more suicides, more people, angst of just public pressure that forces people into these situations where they get depressed. And all we can say is the best alternative to that is to fight back, give yourself some dignity and realize what's going on, that it isn't normal for a person to live all their life and then say, yes, I have to sell my house so I can go to the hospital and then die there. And it's just sick. And you got to expose the people and show the solutions, and you got to do it in a positive way, because it's for your future, and it's for your children's future, and for your grandchildren, and it's just humanity's sake.
I mean, I remember for years and years hearing about the so-called death tax that Republicans and others crowed about. How horrible it was that someone would have to give up their life savings when they died because of this horrible tax. Well, the truth is, the horrible tax is the healthcare. When you die, when you're getting the end of lifetime, it ends up costing thousands and hundreds of thousands sometimes of dollars. It's crazy. Another comment, or actually a question, was is if we went to single payer, how many people would lose their jobs, and what's the solution?
Well, I think that again, some people, you can't run away from the fact that some people would lose their job. And I think that the reality is kind of like everything in society, or even in any court system, there's like a balancing test, and you have to balance that test. And first of all, in all of the single payer bills, including the current bill in Congress, or both bills in Congress and Senate, there is a unemployment compensation, and there is retraining, and then there is a gradual, not a gradual, but an attempt to move people from current jobs into other jobs. And when you have our argument is, when you have an expansion of healthcare, which would come with expanded Medicare-for-all, many of the people who would lose their jobs now working for insurance companies would actually be able to shift into another administrative function, because even with Medicare-for-all, you would need people to process bills, do the paperwork, and all of the things, but they would be doing it in the public interest, not to deny people benefits. So then on a wholly kind of like other level, you have to ask yourself, well, what is the balancing test here, where you have tens of millions of people who don't have any health care, tens of millions of more people who have care health care coverage that is insufficient, and they're in debt. Then you have all the people who we just talked about that are already in debt and they're losing. And so is it fair to say that 5,000 or 10,000 or 15 or 20,000 people, we should let tens of millions of people suffer in society so that we can protect them? It's not even the jobs of the people, it's more the profits. That's what the focus should be, is like, we need to eliminate the profits of the insurance company. We need to eliminate the profits of the drug companies. And yes, that will be a consequence of Medicare-for-all. And the job situation would be just as, like, in the Green New Deal. or we have any transformative thing in society, you've got to provide for the workers. We can't have a society that doesn't care about working people and losing their jobs. So what we're saying is that's in the bill. We're doing the best to do that. And the last thing is that I started out my career many years ago. I worked in the steel mill, and before, this was, let's say, 1968. This was before the whole thing collapsed, let's say 10 or 12 years after that. But how many times did I hear people say, we don't give a goddamn about those steel workers. They were lazy. They didn't do anything for us. And it's good that they lost their jobs. And how many times did you hear such stupid statements from people? And I think what we don't want to do is fall into that. But I think what we have to argue is that there's a much greater benefit to society as a whole, and that we can take care of those people, because that's progress, that's humanity, that's what we have to move in. And when we were able to pass Medicare for all, we'll be able to address the problems that come with progress. And literally that this is an immense progress.
Yeah. So let me ask another question. You're talking about putting this Medicare for all in. People are going to be getting money taken out of their paycheck, I guess, in the form of taxes to pay for this thing. But isn't it also true that with all these savings and whatnot, that they'll have more to spend? And then also, if it takes the healthcare costs out of the paycheck, how's that affect workers? I mean, like, you're not paying for your health insurance anymore.
It'll essentially be a wage increase for many workers, is what it comes down to. Is what you're really saying is that if now people pay tens of thousands of dollars a year in insurance premiums taken out of their paycheck, and in the end result, if it's substantially cheaper, which it will be cheaper for almost every working person to have Medicare for all. Not only will it be cheaper, meaning that they'll pay less money in taxes that they now pay for everything else, they're going to get a wage increase. Their wages will literally go up. Who needs millions of dollars of CEO salaries? Those things, they don't provide anything. I told people a couple of years ago, we were in Vienna, Austria, and we were walking around the streets, and I said, one of the happiest things I saw was when we walked past the hospital, all you saw was a cross, like a medical sign. You didn't see a big blaring sign, UPMC, you didn't see Highmark, you didn't see Cigna, you didn't see billboards for all kinds of, it's like a waste of money. And people have to realize they're taking your premiums and they're spending them on ads. Why do you need an ad in the Heinz Field that says this is the UPMC red zone? This is bullshit. It doesn't make it. It's, come on, you know.
And my mailbox, you already alluded to it, but my mailbox almost every day
and
is filled with.
This time of year is when all of the insurance companies go to try to get you to sign up for your Medicare Advantage. The Medicare Advantage, again, is the biggest ripoff going. It's subsidized by taxpayers. It's privatizing Medicare. $1,000 per recipient more they get than regular Medicare people. Why is that? Well, because our Congress is bought off, and nobody wants to address the issues. That's why I'm so happy to support you and other people who have the courage to do this, because we don't live in a democracy anymore. It's an oligarchy.
It's funny because that's some of the conversation that's going on in the chat. I'm not gonna go into that, except for to say that one of our upcoming chats next Wednesday is talking about the high price of corruption. J. Ting Walker from PA 23 and I will be with Frank Kirkwood talking about March on Harrisburg's demand that, among other things, we get money out of politics, because I guarantee that our politicians are getting money from these industries. So another question that is on here, let me see if I can get back to it. Jeez, so many questions. Was asking about, let me go to one of the other questions that I got here. you and I went to a thing in Clarion a few years ago. You were presenting and I was there to watch. And I remember someone in the audience, well, he just about attacked me because I was somehow associated with you. And he told me that you were a union thug or a communist, one or the other. And it reminded me that one of the things that I hear over and over again is socialized medicine. And you already addressed that. But going back to when Obamacare was first proposed, there was this thing about death panels. Are there going to be death panels?
Well, I mean, Sarah Palin, again, those are all the hysterical, distortions that are used by opponents of Medicare-for-all. When, if you look at it, as we already described, they're occurring now under this system. Not only are there death panels, but people are dying. How many people have died of COVID that is unnecessary because they don't have health care, or because there's no centralized or organized federal response that can deliver the necessary things that people need. A society that can't provide health care to its people, whether it's through COVID or that is the death panel. That is the death panel that's going on now. But as far as the health care of people, that if you had a single, currently, the decisions on whether people get health care are really made, first of all, primarily by insurance companies. And as we said, if you look under the SEC, if you look under the Securities and Exchange Commission, the insurance companies have a fiduciary responsibility. Their main goal is not to provide health care, it's to provide profits. So if you want to talk about how are healthcare decisions really made in today's society, they're fundamentally made first on a decision of profit. Now, if that's the case, if you had a single payer system, healthcare decisions would still have to be made, but they would be made under the basis of your physician and your doctor and what is there necessary for in terms of income in the healthcare system, which gets us back to the real essence of why we need this system, because our call is everybody in. And what does that do? Everybody in the same system means that there will be a collective understanding that this system has to be funded, it has to be provided, it has to be modernized, it has to be delivered in a sane and progressive and a fashion. And if you have a system like we have today, so many people get insurance and then they say, well, we don't give a damn about the people who don't have insurance. I got mine. And then you have the people who don't have insurance, but they're on Medicaid, and then they're looked at as pariahs. They're looked at some kind of like slugs or lowlifes. Why should we do? And if you have Medicare for all, everybody, it's just like Social Security. Everybody's in the same system. It's not means tested. It has nothing to do with your salary. And that will bring us collective power to maintain the system, to maintain the coverage. And that's really the only civilized way to do things. I think if you talk to most people, and we explain this to most people, they pretty much understand it. And the idea that this is communism or whatever, I mean, go back in history. Social Security was communism. Medicare in 1965, where Black people couldn't even get coverage at all, that was communism too. So, you have to just not run away from those issues, but you basically deal with them head on. You deal with them in a principled fashion and you don't back down. And if you do that, you'll win people over.
Yeah. So what about, here's another question. It's along the same lines. I think it was the Nevada primary. One of the unions out there really hammered Bernie Sanders because why should we get into Medicare for all? We already have we've negotiated really good insurance.
Yeah, I think that already is the balloon there. It's burst, because not only do those people now don't have any jobs because of the COVID, but the medical insurance, again, whether it's delivered through the union health and welfare fund or whether it's delivered through some insurance company that they contract to, it's all based on their employment. So they may have, but the reality again is sit down. think this through. Under expanded and improved Medicare for all, you would get almost double the amount of benefits that the best union insurance plan can give you. And there's no argument with that. No insurance has long-term care. Almost none of them have the benefits of that we're talking about, all of the benefits, I mean. And so this whole argument that well, we have a good insurance, well, that's all tenuous. And you can see with the pandemic, it's all collapsed. It's just not true anymore. It never was true. And this is the biggest example of why it's a fraud. You have to ask yourself, why is it that the AFL-CIO and all these unions, or many of them, passed resolutions for Medicare for all, but instead of fighting for Medicare for all, they're not doing anything. They're sitting on their hands. And I think that's one of the weaknesses that goes back to, or not back to, but the addressing of, well, how is it that if we have all this support that we claim, how is it that we're going to get this passed? And I think that one of the key elements that we're missing here is a vigorous labor movement. We don't have a vigorous labor movement, meaning when I say vigorous, I mean one that actually fights for the workers. They're more interested in protecting, many times, whatever the company says, they just go along with it. So that is an internal, just like we need to fight within our own political system with our own political parties to move us towards the things that people need. Like I'm looking here, 84% of Americans approve paid maternity. 70% of Americans want to uphold Roe versus Wade. 69% of Americans single payer health care. Raising the minimum wage, 67% want taxes on billionaires. None of these issues are ever going to be addressed, and they aren't even being addressed now.
No, the climate's another one. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so the point is that if we continue to sit on our hands and think that voting is our only hope, that's not going to work. And so if I have,
we have to be organizing all the time. Agreed. Okay. How about one of the things we keep hearing about with our pharmaceutical companies is that if we go to a system like Medicare for all, we're going to take all the profits out of it and they're going to stop doing research and we won't have all these great drugs that we have now.
Well, number one, as I think I said before, not almost, but a substantial amount of the research and primary basic foundational studies for all new drugs or existing and current drugs have been done by the public tax dollars. And
yeah, my brother's a researcher. He does that. That's what he does at Johns Hopkins. Yep.
Yeah. So, and I think that if you look back, I can't think of what the amendment was, but it was in the 80s or 90s. There was Birch Bayh, who was a senator from Indiana. And what they did is they literally passed a bill in Congress that gave this research done by the publics, and it transferred it with the right to the corporations to take it over and use it for profit. And that was, that was the death knell. And the second thing is the advertising. Most countries in the world don't have pharmaceutical advertising on TV. I mean, if you watch the TV on especially in the afternoon when most older people are watching TV or whatever, how they target that demographic, it's one commercial after the other. But one of the most sickening commercials is the ridiculous Joe Namath. He could barely talk. He's out selling Medicare Advantage plans. Medicare, and then the next commercial is for another drug that most people don't even know about, but somehow or other they need. And again, this is all a systemic part of the healthcare system, the non-system that we have. But when people say, oh, you say, Ed, that the system is dysfunctional. No, it's only dysfunctional to us, but it's functioning very good for the people that was intended to. Yeah, for the money people. So.
Yes, another thing that you and I went down to Washington County a while back, having to do with the EpiPen.
Yeah.
I mean, there's another example. I mean, something that costs a few bucks to make, and they're charging $600 a dose or something.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I was going to say that when we did that EpiPen, there was a public outcry, but not one politician came to that picket line, not one. And you know, it's like, you know, the same thing with the article that was in the Post-Gazette about the General Accounting Office saying they're selling junk insurance. They played it up as if Bob Casey, our Democratic senator, is some kind of hero. But he's not going to change anything. He's not for single payer. He's not going to tell the drug companies to do anything. He just likes to make it look like in the media they play like it's like studio wrestling. You know, Bob Casey says this, and they give him a softball question, and he answers it, and it appears as if he's on your side, but he's not on your side.
Another issue that really is going to play out in PA 64, which is a rather rural district, is the sad state of affairs with rural hospitals. How would that be changed with Medicare for all?
Well, I think what's happening with rural hospitals is they're being gobbled up, number one, by big hospital systems. You know, and it's no secret, again, that UPMC got something like over $1 billion in money from the federal government, even though their profits are astounding. They got $1 billion in COVID money. And what they're doing is that, like, for instance, in many of the hospitals, they're shutting down maternity wards because maternity wards, psych wards don't make profits. And not that there isn't a need for them in the community, but again, because everything is based on the bottom line, so the rural hospitals are many of them are poor. They provide the minimal community services, and because the money is not there, they're shrinking. They're shrinking and they're closing at faster rates. And so if you had a single payer system, the hospitals would be not constructed, but they would be funded and literally spaced where people need them for the needs of the people. Whereas today, the hospitals are essentially where they're at, and what they're doing is based on profit. The best example is where I live now. Okay, I live in Oakmont. In 5 miles away or 4 miles away is St. Margaret's Hospital. About 8 miles away is UPMC in Monroeville. Then I have Shadyside, all the hospitals in the city of Pittsburgh, which are maybe 10 miles away. So guess what happened 1 mile away from Oakmont? Allegheny Health Network decided they needed to build a small hospital. And there isn't really a need for that here. And under the old system, there would be called a certificate of need, where people would have to show that they needed the system, or that the system needed new beds or whatever. But now they because it's just like a free for all. They can build hospitals. It's just to snuff out the other competition, and that's inherent in this system. So in the richer areas, there's many hospitals, but in the poorer areas, in the rural areas, there's less and less, and it's going to continue that way unless we can have a system.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I remember was it's not only just rural areas too, but wasn't there a situation with the Braddock Hospital?
Yes, Braddock Hospital, poor area. It's poor. It's not just rural. It's areas where, you know, so they shut down Braddock Hospital, and of course most of the politicians didn't really care, and now there's not a hospital there. There's 200 some jobs that were lost, more than that, in that community. And again, the other thing is that it is kind of difficult sometimes for people to understand how the funding would work. But under Medicare for all, the hospitals would have what's called global budgeting. And that is, you know, again, it's really important to understand what that means. Global budgeting means right now, hospitals that make money, that are profitable, can use all of their money for anything that they want. So if you take a UPMC gigantic hospital and they're making money because they can do things perhaps cheaper, or because they're gargantuan, they can take the money that they get from Medicare and Medicaid and insurance, and if they want to build a new hospital, nobody tells them no. But if you had single payer, you would have a system where the hospital's capital expansions, like we're talking about here, new hospitals here, or maybe a hospital is needed in a rural area, they couldn't use their current money, their profits, to just expand at will, because it would be based on what's needed in the public. And that is a crucial element of why you need a new system, because right now hospitals are just out of control.
Two related questions. One of them is, I remember talking to Margaret Flowers. She was actually Kevin Zeese's life partner. She was a pediatrician, and she told me that one of the reasons that she got out of treating children was that the insurance companies basically told her what she could do and what she couldn't do, and how she should treat and that kind of stuff. And so she said it was just a horrible situation. And I also used to work out with a doctor who retired. I mean, he was in his late 40s. He retired because he was so darn sick of the paperwork. He had to have multiple clerical people in his office just to handle all the different clerical tasks for the different insurance companies. And then the other question was, and this is related to it, is online we had, how do doctors feel about single payer?
Well, I think that in general, the doctors are becoming more and more sympathetic. I think that in the last AMA convention, which was either in the spring or in the summer of this year, there was a resolution not passed, but it was introduced, and it all for single payer, and it almost passed in the AMA. But the AMA, if you go back, and that's why the movie, the Power to Heal movie, and anything, if you look at the history of the AMA, it's kind of a rotten history. It's an evil history. They haven't been on the right side of healthcare for people. So right now, there's more and more doctors that are moving in this direction, and in some of the different specialties or the divisions of the physicians, they actually are favoring it. So, and we do have the Physicians for National Health Plan that is courageously around. And I would say that if you want information on single payer or Medicare-for-all, go to pnhp.org, and you can get a lot of information and facts and figures, because a lot of this is there's tens of millions of dollars to literally brainwash people in their own self-interest. But the doctors, what we like is if the doctors would be taking a more aggressive approach to this. And that's kind of like what we need to do, is we need to build our forces up, including the medical providers, because they play a critical role, obviously, in this whole thing. And in our WPA single payer, we have 4 physicians that are on our steering committee, and we go out and talk to people, and we're willing to do that if people are interested. And you can get a hold of us if you're willing to do some education or talk to you about how you can get maybe your union or any other church groups. We show the movie to different church groups, other community groups. So it's building a movement. And I think that the idea that somehow or other what we've been talking about here is somehow going to magically come to pass through legislation it just ain't so. We're going to eventually have to pass it, but it's going to take a much stronger movement. And I think before 15 years ago, when we started this, our goal was to do a lot of education and get union resolutions, and which we did. Many people don't even know there's like over 500 unions that have passed resolutions for single payer. The question not now is, do we have support? The real question is, where's the political will? How can we mobilize the political will? What's necessary? And it's pretty clear that with all of the other socioeconomic problems that are cascading in this society, killing people, we need to organize like an alternative movement, and the support for all these things is there. What's lacking is there's a political vacuum. We have really no leaders, and it's not like just saying, well, Michael Bagdes-Canning, we got him to sign on for single payer. Well, we need more than that. We need people that'll talk about it, organize for it, and be real leaders and spokespersons for it. Because if we don't have that, the powers that be who run this whole system, they know exactly what's going on. And they've been fighting us tooth and nail on a much more aggressive because we're getting stronger. And I think that as we've talked about, we got to change the balance of power. Right now, our power is not strong enough to push us to a higher level. And with people out there listening today, join us and make it stronger. And we can talk about how to do that, and vote for Mike too. I mean, seriously, because if it isn't for people like him, we wouldn't be able to be talking about this.
Like, I kind of want to talk about that, and this will probably be the last thing we're going to talk about because we're already over the 8 o'clock hour. But you hit it. This campaign it's one of the main issues. We're talking about Medicare for all, but that's not really a state issue. That's a national issue. But my goal in bringing it up is that it can have a huge impact in the state of Pennsylvania, the government, saving money and that kind of stuff. But even more important to me is building the infrastructure for what you're saying, building the movement. You can elect me, but it's not going to change a darn thing if we don't have people mobilized and out fighting for it. So just a little bit, because like I said, we're past 8 o'clock now. But what do you think? It's not going to. This is not a Pennsylvania bill, but it's something that's critical to my campaign.
Right. I mean, there is a bill in the Pennsylvania legislature, and in it you could use it for educational purposes for the things that you just said. All the municipalities who have the public employees, the school districts, the state employees, the state taxpayers would save hundreds of millions of dollars if you had Medicare for all. Plus, people will have better benefits, and that would help the overall health conditions of the whole state. So yes, it kind of is a state issue, but how do we pass it? It would be difficult to structure it on the state level, and that's why we're for national Medicare for all. So if you could get elected and advocate to build this movement and get the state legislature to push the Congress people and to get different things, that's how we have to do it. And I guess it's like when you look back through history and how the labor movement's organized, so the civil rights movement or the women's rights movement, or every movement that has gotten substantial change, it starts with the grassroots. Like for my thing in the labor movement, people think that the labor movement suddenly sprung out of thin air. John L. Lewis had a bright idea and said, "Oh, let's organize the CIO and get a real." No, it was people who were left-wing people in the 1920s who worked in small unions, who had strikes, who talked to people, and they formed a foundation that when the time came, that served as the basis for the upsurge. And that's kind of like where we're heading towards now. May not happen a year, who can predict it? But the point is, we do know one thing. If we don't do what we have to do, things will not get better. They will get worse. And I think that it's time for people to wake up, get off your duff, get involved, and realize who your enemies are, who your friends are, and take a stand and look at your own history and realize that you can play a role in this, and you'll be a better person for it.
So thank you. That's perfect. That's what I was hoping you were going to say. So just a few things from me before we sign off, and that's this campaign is taking no corporate money. It's built on building a grassroots movement. It's built on small donations from folks like you, and we need you. Check out Mike for PA64.com, and I hope to see you in November. So good night, everybody.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Ed.
All right.